Welcome back, everyone, to a special episode of Profiles in Risk. I am your host, Nick Lamparelli. We have a jam-packed event here, locked and loaded, with a lot of subject matter experts in different areas of insurance. This particular episode is to focus on the Insurance Nexus 2019 Insurance Awards, which will be held in Chicago, Illinois on September 12th. Yes, we are a bit away from that date, but we're going to be talking about innovation. We're going to talk about how experts think about innovation, how they judge it. So the types of criteria that they use when looking at and evaluating disparate companies, disparate innovations, and how they might make a difference in the insurance industry. So let's go, let's Brady Bunch this and go to my left here. Don LeBlanc is the managing director at the Hartford InsurTech Hub. Just beneath him is Paul Carroll, who a lot of you might know at Insurance Nerds. He's the editor-in-chief at Insurance Thought Leadership. Directly beneath me is Nicole Cook, who's the managing director at the Global Insurance Accelerator. I'll see you in a couple weeks. To my bottom right is my bottom left. However you're looking at this, is Margaret Reese-Milkent. Who's the managing partner at the Jacobson Group. And last but not least, Scott McCormick, right over here. And he is the president of the Connected Vehicle Trade Association. Welcome, everybody.
Glad to be here.
Good.
Nice to be here.
Don, you got the short straw, so I'm gonna throw the first question out to you. And it has to do with insurance banquets and insurance awards. You know, why is it important for us to celebrate all the hard work that a lot of the innovators, a lot of the team players, the people who have sacrificed? Why is it so important for us to celebrate this?
That's a great question. I think for those of us who participate in these a lot, it can seem a little bit like an overload of events and celebrations. But if you imagine people who are working within insurance companies or working on new innovation, it takes a lot of courage within your organization to affect change, to bring up new ideas, because the easier thing to do is to sort of keep doing it status quo, and that's really not going to move the insurance industry forward. So I think it's great to take a step back, pat a few people on the back, and usually by the time you or I or anyone in the audience sees the innovation, there's many hours of convincing, arm twisting, presentations, meetings with several people to move that innovation forward. And a small gesture of recognizing that goes a long way, not only for the people who are involved, but also for others who are around them, that they can go back and talk about it and say, hey, I just won this award. Even just participating is a great thing. And someone who might be then sitting at their desk saying, I have this idea, maybe I should move it forward and maybe I should start thinking about it, will actually do so. So that impetus for change, I think, is very important.
Yeah. Nicole, you're part of the GIA, the Global Insurance Accelerator. Can you talk about, I would say a lot of the innovation is coming from the startups. They're coming from these newer companies that are going, that are fighting for financing, fighting for capital, fighting for sales to get in the door. They're fighting for all this stuff. You're fully exposed to all of that, as is Don. Can you talk about a lot of the stress that goes into creating a startup and trying to get traction and get it off the ground?
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I think so many of the things that Don just said feeds into this really well. It's the sometimes even at the larger companies, feeling like you're taking the lead on an idea, something that's innovative, is not always easy, and so you might have even more of the resources to do it. These startups that we're getting exposure to at the GIA and within the broader InsurTech community, they're hungry and they're moving fast, and they have these ideas to change the industry or help the industry evolve, but the pace with which they're moving is really incredible. And so what we see and I experience is kind of helping. We try to help bridge the gap in terms of how do you keep moving quickly, but when you're working with and inside the insurance industry, we need to help educate on both sides so both parties can really kind of benefit and move on a timeline that makes sense. And I think that's a good friction because it helps both sides kind of move that forward. Just a couple more things I would say about that in terms of, a week or 2 weeks for a startup feels like a lifetime sometimes when you're trying to get to a decision around, can I just have a conversation with you to explain to you what my company or product or service is? And
or 6 months, Nicole.
I know, right? And so that's absolutely fair. And so those are all the things that building a startup, any industry, InsurTech being no different. There's a lot to do to stay alive and keep your business moving forward.
Yeah. Margaret, I want to ask you about innovation, and I think this is an appropriate question for everyone to answer. So I'll start with Margaret. 4 of the categories, and we'll have on the show notes. I'll have the link that lists all of the different categories. I believe there are 19 total awards being presented, but in 4 of those categories where all of you judges are going to be voting on, there's the word innovation. And so I'm learning that can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. Margaret, when you're thinking of innovation and you're thinking of in insurance, how do you compute or quantify innovation? What's on your checklist as you're thinking about company startups, divisions within companies that are innovative? What crosses your mind?
Nick, that's a great lead in. And, I want to tell you, the first thing I think about is reimagining the industry. And to Nicole's point, how do we educate and how do we evangelize? We're working and living in what I call a VUCA landscape. It's volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex, it's ambiguous. And this is our reality today. And innovation speaks to that. How do you navigate and how do you work through and work in and embrace the VUCA landscape? And so what we're talking about is curiosity and agility and collaboration and influence and relationships. So those are some of the things that are going through Margaret's mind as I think and I really envision what the future is and what innovation means to insurance today.
Yeah. Scott, what's your view on innovation? How do you think through that?
Well, innovation means it's something new, something novel. When we look at startups, they have to be innovative because that's where they're a startup. They're doing something that no one else is doing, or they're doing it in a different way than has been done before, and bringing it forward. When we look at all of the ecosystem that's out there, from the startups to those companies that have been around 100 years, they all require evolution in their products and services because their customers evolve, their needs evolve. I don't like the term disruptive. Disruptive only applies if you're not paying attention. If some change has occurred and you're not current with what's going on or watching what's going on, it will be disruptive to you. but it's not disruptive to the industry. It's something that's going on and changing. So when I look at these candidates that come up, unless it's one of those newcomer awards, anybody can be innovative. To Diane's point, it's much more difficult, takes much longer inside large established corporations because they have a persona, they have a way of taking risk out of decisions. Whereas with a startup, they're much more agile, much more nimble, and much less risk adverse in that side. So the innovative aspect is to look at what is it that they're doing new and different? Where are they getting traction for that? Is it a robust solution to a problem that exists? That tends to be the tripod that I look at it for.
Okay, good. Paul, Insurance Thought Leadership has probably either covered or dealt with in one form or another, probably thousands of insurtechs. But you have relationships with a lot of other folks in the industry as well. How do you personally quantify innovation? What's on your checklist?
Sure. We even publish you among the 113 leaders. So first, let me say I envy your backdrop. I mean, clearly, I either need a fancier living room or need a green screen behind me. So well done. As I think about innovation, I think there may be some useful distinctions. One is people sometimes lump everything together, but I think you can divide innovation into what we used to call faster, better, cheaper when I was a partner at a consulting firm, and what I won't call disruptive innovation, as long as we're not liking that term, but is more a blank sheet of paper, clean sheet of paper. And I think that from my standpoint, the Ubers of the world are much more interesting than somebody who does a taxi cab better, right? So I look for that kind of innovation. But at the same time, there is so much inefficiency in insurance that there's an awful lot that can be done to streamline the process and take out a lot of costs. I think once you get enough cost out of insurance, there really will be a transformation in how insurance is bought and sold. So that's one distinction I'd make. Another is that there's pitching and catching. And I think with insurtechs, I'm more focused on the pitching because they are the ones, as Scott said, that need to have the new ideas, really stir things up. With the established companies, I'm more interested in how well they catch at this point, because they're not necessarily the ones who are going to have the brand new ideas, but they can do the sort of thing that Nicole was referencing and make sure that they get back to somebody within a couple days or a week, because time really matters to a startup, and not make people fit into their process. So new ideas are great, but it sort of depends where you are in the system, what I think matters in terms of innovation.
Don, innovation. You get to deal with a lot of these companies every single day, you and Nicole. So I'm interested in hearing how you're thinking about it.
Yeah, so I agree with Paul's comment in that we look at thousands of startups to choose our final 10 that come through our program, each program that we have, and a lot of what we look at not only is sort of, I'll call it business model transformation, right? So it's really shifting the way insurance is done, but also if you look at sort of the futuristic curve. The analogy of, if you're planning for a future that's, a year off, 2 years off, you're probably going to miss the mark of where you need to be, because we know that some of those things take that long to implement or integrate. So we tend to look a little bit more further away on the kind of futuristic curve from an innovation perspective. Unfortunately, sometimes that does have a conflict with what the insurers are ready to absorb. Because like was mentioned before, often they're looking to find the things that give you the really quick cost-benefit analysis or fix a process that needs to be revised. So sometimes it's a little bit different of what's sort of innovation versus solving business problems.
Nicole, last but not least, how do you think about innovation?
I think my simplified simplified point of view around this is when, when I hear a well articulated problem, that there's an idea around a solution to that problem that either exists, because it likely does in some capacity. It may not be completely novel, but the ability to articulate that in a way that others haven't executed well on, that gets really interesting for me, for us. And so I think that's kind of how I think about innovation. Articulate the problem you're solving to me really well.
Okay, so staying with you, Nicole, do you believe that innovation by necessity requires technology?
That's a good question.
I mean, are you seeing any sort of innovative companies coming in where I would even say where the technology, the customer or the end user is abstracted from the technology. They don't actually know what's going on. All they just know is something's better. But by necessity, does innovation require someone software, someone coding?
I don't think so. I'm not, I guess, thinking of an example quickly to cite, but no, business processes that could be improved by a human because someone's more clearly identified the problem that the human can solve better. It's still innovative.
Yeah. So someone on Friday told me that innovation can be as simple as you have a better solution to hiring talent.
Mm-hmm.
Like that could be innovative, and that could manifest its way back all the way down to the end user as well. If you're doing that, Don, by necessity, is innovation and technology. I know they generally go hand in hand, but does one require the other?
Yeah, I think, from my perspective, and it's similar to what Nicole said. I counsel our startups a lot to really not talk about their technology when they're talking about the solution, right? And so I think the answer is if it provides a new solution to a very difficult problem, however that is provided, it should actually be transparent, the technology behind it. It's actually, if the experience that whoever is experiencing the solution is a pleasant experience or is a better experience, then that itself is innovative.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Paul?
Oh, I agree. I think that technology tends to drive things in a very general way, and certainly doesn't need to be an explicit part of a solution. To me, the biggest change maybe in insurance has been that people actually are starting to care about the customer experience. It used to be sort of take it or leave it. But now people have seen what we used to call Amazoning, where people get used to the one-click sort of experience at Amazon and are seeing what's happening in other industries. So if you track the customer experience, you can find all kinds of ways to innovate, I believe, without necessarily having a specific piece of technology involved. And when technology is involved, in a lot of cases, I think it can be at a very basic level. You can just touch people immediately in ways that you never could before. With some of the work I've done on innovation, including some of the books I've written, my co-author and I have decided that there's really only one kind of synergy that works, and we call it, do you want fries with that? And there are a lot of places in insurance, when selling a car or selling a home, whatever, where you can say, do you want fries with that? So that's technology, because it wasn't there 20 years ago, 25 years ago, before the internet really took hold. Yeah. But it's a pretty unsophisticated sort of technology.
Yeah, for Scott and Margaret, Scott, I'll start with you. Someone I spoke to recently said, if the customer doesn't see the innovation or doesn't feel it in a smoother process or whatever, then it's not innovation. What do you think about that particular view of innovation?
Yeah, I don't agree with that. I mean, one of the reasons that you don't see a lot of non-technical, non-product innovation is because there are things that are done to improve your business. As was mentioned earlier, I have as you mentioned, I have a better way of finding and keeping good people. I have a better business model. Well, when you develop those things and they're innovative and they work, you don't go out and advertise them, because the insurance community tends to be somewhat homogenous. They all tend to do the same thing over time. And so when I look at it, it's like, okay, I can see the innovation inside the company. My customer doesn't necessarily have to see what was done, but he has to see the result of what was done, which is better service, lower price, more effective delivery, a better understanding of what it is you're buying. Those, it's not always the direct result of did I see the innovation, but did I get the benefit of whatever that was.
Margaret, how important is the customer to any sort of planning around innovation?
I think the customer is king and queen. So I will say the focus on the customer experience as a trend in the insurance industry is big. And I would say I don't think it's going away. I think that, the human skills that we talk about, the impact, the feel, the touch, they're still important. They're very, very important. And we're talking about it. And in fact, there's a growing climb in insurance organizations. They're hiring of customer experience people who are completely focused on customer experience. So we know that's happening right now.
Okay, so another transitioning to the final part of your stressful role of having to evaluate all of these different companies. There's quite a few categories around the concept of teams, which I love. I think it's like embedded in my DNA technology. Margaret, I'm going to start with you. For the team awards, sort of like the question I asked for innovation, how are you thinking about teams and what makes them remarkable and what makes them innovative? What are you looking for the appropriate team, whether it's a startup or just a team in buried in the cellar of some giant insurance company in Hartford or Des Moines, Iowa? How do you think about team, and how are you going to judge that?
I'm looking for teams that are becoming communities, and they're becoming ecosystems, and they're learning and they're evolving. How do they learn? And do they have some of the traits that I look for in great entrepreneurs? What is their pace of learning, their pace of growth? And then when they fail, what happens? How do they move forward? How do they pick themselves up? I look at resilience, in that, and curiosity. Those are some of the characteristics that I think are really important to not just win once, but to have a pattern of success and that evolution of energy and growth.
Yep. Scott, teamwork?
Yeah, I agree with everything she just said. I don't know that I could add much more to that. Thank you, Margaret.
No, you're welcome.
Well, how about this, Scott? Anything common that you've seen in successful teams, or the opposite?
Yeah, there's no real stratification of reporting, if you will. And I've worked for General Electric for a number of years. I worked for other large corporations, and the most successful ones, being on a team, it didn't matter if you were the intern there or the senior manager. Good teams would accept that everyone as a collective mind is better than any one of them. And that's where you get the best responses out of it. It's people that work together, not intimidated by the fact that somebody is somebody's boss's boss, not worrying about whether or not they don't think they have enough experience to offer their input, but people that are comfortable airing stuff, tabling it, deciding what goes on in the parking lot, deciding what's worth pursuing, and rewarding the team as well as the individual.
Yeah. Paul, the whole is generally greater than the sum of the parts, as the saying goes. How do you think about team? And I'm particularly interested in what successful teams do right. How are you able to flag whether that team has it, big capital IT?
It's fairly hard because you can't see into the inner workings, but I, like you, was pleased to see teams show up so many times because there's been a lot of really interesting research done on teams in recent years. Google, for instance, has looked at what makes a successful team and found that it's basically psychological security. You can go ahead and say something and not have somebody tell you you're stupid. And they found huge differences between the best performing teams and the worst performing teams. I helped write a book a few years ago with the two leaders of the consulting practice at Heidrick and Struggles, and thought the most interesting research they had was also on the difference between a really high performing team and a low performing team. As I look at it, a key thing is making sure that these teams really draw across the organization. So if you're trying to innovate within your existing structure, I think the odds are low that you're going to succeed. You have to be able to cherry pick across organizations and do the team first, and then have the organizational structure follow based on the innovation. So in terms of what you can actually see from the outside, it's probably as much as anything that willingness to pull from different places that I think marks a good team as opposed to an unsuccessful team.
Yeah. Don and Nicole, I'm really curious about the startup teams that you see. I have my own startup, as everyone that's listening knows. I think one thing that's really valuable in a team is diversity. I think in whatever talent level you can find it. Like, I just feel like the complementary skills get to that point where you can get to 1 + 1 = 3. The teams that you're seeing on a day-to-day basis, Don, we'll start with you, but Nicole, I would like you to answer this as well. How important is that aspect, the diversity in all of its different forms?
Yeah, so I actually just wrote a blog on our last week's program on diversity this morning, so very appropriate topic.
I didn't know that.
I just finished it. It just got posted a couple seconds ago.
We'll put that on the show notes.
Anyway, I think diversity of thought as well as founder teams are very important. We seldom select a single founder startup, and it doesn't necessarily have to be on the startup team. It could be on their advisory board. It could be from their circle of mentors. But our comment is always, if you have a group of people who all think alike, your outcome and solution is going to be tainted exactly that way. And so we try to get as much of diversity of thought and experiences and cultures in that. And that's one of the powers of our program as well, is that when you bring in 10 startups together and they're together for 3 months, they all help each other out with that diversity of thought, as well as our mentors who are here. So we think that's critical, and we try to inform some of the startups if they have a gap to add someone with that skill set within their advisory board or within their network to help them out. And that seems to be an extreme value to them.
Nicole?
I care a lot about organizational structure and the makeup of especially a founding team. But ever so, as it grows and adds team members, that it's intentional. And, when I think about more from the startup perspective, when these and what we're looking at, or it's oftentimes, it's a small team, it's a lean team, but it's their ability to execute on this idea. So when I am talking to potential investor in a startup, probably their number one criteria is the team, right? If this might not be an idea, the idea needs to be able to be executed by these people right now. And so it's a lens with which kind of draws back to when I think if I can have a couple minute conversation with a person or a team and they're able to eloquently articulate the problem that they're solving uniquely, that they're the right folks, because they're almost so obsessed with it. It's just all that they think about and work on.
I like that answer a lot. Speaking of team, the five of you are a smaller subset of a larger team to do as the panel of expert judges. How will you all function as a team? Anyone?
Yeah, I think I can speak to that. Not having worked with these particular people before, but I've been judging award ceremonies for several decades now. And when you get into that process, there is an evaluation that you're making from your prejudices, your mindset, your experience. You may look at something and give it an average score. But it's important that every judge then caveats his score by saying, I think this guy was great, mediocre, lousy, for whatever reason. Because then the judges can say, well, oh no, you don't understand. He does this and this and this, or this is why I think this is important. And as we all come from a bit of diversity in terms of our background, it allows us to learn from each other and to make a better award judgment.
Yeah. How much is there an allowance for collaboration amongst the judges? How much is there an allowance for Paul to tell Margaret, I think you should reconsider your viewpoint on this, or Margaret to do the same? Could you guys talk a little bit about that? I've never been involved in anything like this, so I think the audience would be curious.
Yeah, that typically only occurs is if there's a big break in terms of the scoring. Like if one person scored the person high and everyone else scored him low, they tend to discount the one high one, and vice versa. If there's a clear division, three of us think they're good, or it's split between two candidates, then the administrating organization will typically send it back out and say, would you weigh in? Would you say why you rated this way? We've narrowed it down to 2. Can you cast your vote? So it's a democratic process with a bit of socializing, if you will. But it's only the outliers that we have to do that for.
Yeah.
I'm just going to assume Margaret is always right.
Oh, you're very, very kind. And I'm thinking here as I'm listening to all of you, I'm learning so much already. And this process is really, it's a journey. You know, we have to get to a destination, and it's going to be tough to get to that destination, because I have to believe we're going to have some great assessments to do. But I'm excited about learning and collaborating. And, you know, I'll say if we've got some outliers, good for us. You know, let's create a dialogue and let's practice what we really respect and admire in teams and do the same. Because that's how we're going to all be able to put the spotlight that we really need on the industry and the energy and the focus that is happening right now. This is our time. It's our time to really impact and change. And it's fun to be a part of it, and fun to listen to all of you as well.
Yeah.
See, Margaret was right, just right there.
Yeah. Can I throw in that for Nicole and Don, we'll allow you to kind of finish off. This is going to be time consuming, right? This is not you get a form in an email and you just start checking boxes. This is going to require quite a bit of your time, effort, resources. You essentially have to research all of these different companies and then collaborate with the rest of the team, or is it just going to be a weekend? No? Nicole?
I'll jump in. Yeah.
Please. Save me.
I'm looking forward to it, and I'm thankful that it is not happening in the midst of our current active accelerator, but it's happening at a time where we'll have a little more time to breathe and dig in. But it will be, incredibly. I don't know what how much time it will take, but I'm dedicated to digging in, because we know that everyone's going to be putting in the time just to submit the applications outside of all of the time and effort for the actual job that they've been doing to demonstrate that.
Yep. you ready for spending months and months, Don, researching all of these companies?
Yeah, actually, I'm interested to see how many will overlay those that we've already researched. So we have a pretty large database with ones that we've done some due diligence on. So we're used to that. It's funny. People always ask me, because our accelerator is for 3 months, what do you do the rest of the time? And I always ask, well, how do you think we find these startups? It does take work, and it does take research. We're doing the research. We're used to looking at things, and I do a lot with kind of taking my own personal notes as far as why I've chosen one or the other, and if I happen to run into a startup or whoever it might be at an event, I do share some of my thoughts, because I always coach the startups that, if you're working with a partner or someone who may have rejected your idea or thought for some reason, even that rejection is positive, and that feedback is positive. And so I do also keep those notes as being of value. And anyone who has made it to the point of being judged is also has some value as well. So they should think positively about that.
Okay, that's a fantastic way of ending it. I will end with parting thoughts. I won't go around and have you all sort of say the same thing, but I would like to give a thank you to all 5 of you, not only for taking time out of your day to come here, but as I mentioned, it's being a judge is not getting a form and just checking boxes off. You're going to have to sacrifice a lot of hours kind of digging into a lot of these companies, collaborating with one another. So thank you for taking not just time out of your day here now for this, but your weekends, your nights to dig in, because there are so many quality companies out there, so many quality teams doing a lot of really cool stuff, and it's wonderful that they get to get celebrated a little bit. So I guess that's the parting word. Thank you to all of you for joining and for being part of this particular team of judges.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will, thanks to everyone here. I will put all of the information on the show notes. It is the Insurance Nexus Insurance Awards for 2019. It will be on September 12th in Chicago, Illinois. This is just a team of 5. There are a lot more judges, 19 awards, a bunch of different categories. Check out the show notes. And if you happen to be in the Chicago area, go talk to these folks and help these companies celebrate their big achievements. So thank you again, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.